You can go ahead. Okay, Mayor.
Is he giving us the go-ahead?
Yes.
All right. Special meeting of City Council on the 13th of April is called to order. Would you please call the roll?
Yes, Mayor Studebaker.
Here.
Councilor Lamont.
Here.
Wetland.
Here.
Mans.
Here.
Kohoff.
Here.
O'Neill.
Here.
And Wynn.
Here.
Also joining the meeting this afternoon is City Manager Martha Bennett, City Attorney David Powell, Assistant City Manager Megan Phelan, City Recorder Anne Marie Simpson, Parks and Recreation Director Ivan Anderholm, and Finance Director Sean Cross.
Okay, let me take care of one thing so I don't forget at the end of our discussion. One of the items on the agenda is the approval of minutes for the March 17 meeting. Does anybody want to have a correction or anything on those?
So moved.
I'll second the motion to approve the minutes. Any discussion? Would you call the roll then, please?
Mayor Studebaker.
Yes.
Councilor Lamont.
Yes.
Wendland.
Yes.
Mans.
Yes.
Kohoff.
Yes.
O'Neill.
Yes.
And Wynn.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, the next item of business is Resolution 20-12, which is declaring an additional extension of the state of emergency, ratified and confirmed under Resolution 20-09. I'd make a motion to approve that resolution.
To adopt Resolution 20-12.
Second.
Did you get that, Madam Recorder?
I did.
Okay, any discussion? Would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Studebaker.
Yes.
Councilor Lamont.
Yes.
Wendland.
Yes.
Mans.
Yes.
Kohoff.
Yes.
O'Neill.
Yes.
And Wynn.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
So that extends the declaration of emergency to May 3rd. Okay. Manager Bennett, are you going to give us a briefing on what's going on?
So I thought what we would do with, if this is all right with you, and one of you needs to mute because you're getting a lot of feedback. I don't know who it is. And it's really noisy today at City Hall with the construction. So if I talk even extra loud, I apologize. I thought we'd do is have the community gardens discussion first because there's a lot of energy behind that, and then turn to Mr. Cross and ask him to give you a quick update about what we are seeing on the revenue side, especially in the general fund, because that's the fund where we have the big departments that are at risk. And then I want to give you an overview about some stuff that's going on related to sort of how staff is getting work done and what we're thinking through when it comes to boards and commissions. Is that all right?
Yep.
All right, so with that, let me turn it over to
I'd suggest, and I guess that we open the community gardens on a trial basis. I'd like to see some of the caveats that you're going to put on it, Mr. Anderholm.
Excellent. Thank you, Mayor, City Councilors. If I may, I just want to go through a little bit of the history of the closure of not just the community gardens, but I think that I haven't had an opportunity to talk to the mayor, or the council about some of our closures, so that everybody's on the same page when we're talking about what the closures are. And then what I'd like to do is specifically address the community gardens and their closure, and a plan that we've come up with in the department. So the first thing is back Governor Brown's Executive Order 2012, it mandated certain closures. Those closures included playgrounds, athletic courts, which include tennis, pickleball, bocce, basketball, adult community centers, our indoor tennis center, our water sports center, and then also the cancellation of our recreation programming because of the locations where it takes place. That also includes our teen center. In addition to that, based on reading through the order and trying to encourage people not to do unnecessary travel, and then also taking a look at our park system where we know through experience that we have large congregations of people. These were the additional things that were closed. Those include our park restrooms, our drinking fountains, parking lots to our parks. Most recently, the Roar Amphitheater and the Viewing Dolphin on the Willamette River. Athletic fields, the golf course and driving range, and then also our community gardens.
Mr. Andrew,
So what you'll see,
Mr. Andrew,
yes,
you're really breaking up
Yes.
a lot. Is there something you can do about that? Anne Marie, can Wes make a suggestion or something?
Yes, one option is to turn off your video, Ivan. We'd hear your voice, but not see your face.
And Mary, you're not muted. Is that possible that that's contributing?
I don't think so. I'm not, I'll mute it, but I'm not doing anything.
Just adding that.
okay. Is this any better? Okay, so essentially what we've done is we closed some additional things. The main thing that, in emphasizing that is we're looking at areas where social distancing, physical distancing was harder for us to regulate. So obviously those that were mandated were closed, playgrounds, those types of things. But then also areas where we saw congregations of people.
Just a second, Mr. Andrew. Councilor Mann, you had something?
Yeah, he is breaking up terribly. Do you have it plugged into a headset?
Yes, I do.
Could you try unplugging it from the headset?
Unplug from the headset?
Yes.
Much better.
Okay, then I will.
Councilor Mann.
Thank you.
Maybe we
So,
can see you now too. Maybe you can put your camera on now.
let's see. Can you hear me and see me now?
Yeah, that's great.
The whole 9 yards. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Okay. So what I was saying, I think you heard, but there were mandated closures, and then there were additional closures that we made that we felt that were in line with the goals of the executive order. We looked at those facilities. We tried to keep open major portions of our parks so people could walk and engage in activities that were both individual and that families could do. But we did look at a number of areas, and we did have a number of discussions before those decisions were made internally, especially with those facilities that we felt were more difficult to encourage and enforce social distancing. What I will say is that in the last few weeks since we've made these closures, we have been tracking other agencies around the United States, around the Pacific Northwest on what some of their closures are. And it's amazing the creative ways that agencies have come up with addressing social distancing for things that you wouldn't imagine could. So there are areas that actually have athletic courts that are open that are doing things that can maintain social distancing through some staffing enforcement and some creative thinking. Part of our closures, and I want to talk a little bit about this because we've been giving some thought into how, when things start to normalize, how do we determine that and how would we make decisions? And I'm going to get to community gardens here in a second, but on a general level, we've given some thought about when and how things should unroll. So we have a number of restrictions. Obviously, nobody and nothing that we're reading indicates that the best way to open things up is just to say, surprise, we're open, come back in. So we've been giving a lot of thought to that. And I think from our standpoint, One of the major contributors of that is when we get an indication from the CDC, Oregon Health Authority, Clackamas County Health, that we're seeing a decrease in the number of COVID cases and we're starting to see a decline, would be, the initial trigger for us to actually open up some of those restrictions and allow people in. Again, though, this may look like, at George Rogers Park, for example, the parking lot. And again, what I do want to talk about is the first facilities we would consider opening are those that support, those that are closed that support facilities that are open. So when you think about that, you're thinking about parking lots, you're thinking about restrooms, drinking fountains, those types of things that support portions of parks that are already open. And then after that, we would move to facilities where we can implement plans for social and physical distancing, athletic fields, community gardens, the golf course, things like that. But the idea is that to trigger that, it's really all the data that we're seeing and that we're researching really has to do with the appropriate time to do that is when COVID cases basically are on the decline in your area, in your community. Obviously, the other layer to that is that we do have some closures that were mandated by the governor's office, and those cannot be lifted until the governor terminates that order. That's something that, if I had a genie in a bottle that could tell me when that would happen, that would be wonderful. But we don't know that. So going back specifically to the community garden, because I know council distribution, the department, all of our staff out at the farm face-to-face have had interactions. What we've done is taking into account what some of the gardeners have suggested and some of the ideas that we had previously. We have put together a plan that we're calling a limited access plan for the community gardens. I want to go through kind of how that is structured. And just so you know what we're doing at the community garden at this time right now, our staff is watering plots. We've identified 78 plots that were planted at some point, both from the community gardeners giving us that indication and then also actually walking through the gardens with our garden coordinator. We're doing that, and we actually sent out a letter this weekend based on interaction that our staff had with people at the community gardens that were coming into the community gardens that were concerned about the lack of water for what they had planted. We actually had community gardeners coming to the garden even though they were closed. So what we did is we put together a letter. Essentially, the intent of that letter was to let people know that we were going to be watering their gardens. The other thing that came up last week in 2 letters that came to council distribution made me aware as the director that we had not followed through with the directive of refunding spring registration fees. So in the letter, we addressed that. In that we're refunding those fees. We are still keeping those plots assigned to those gardeners through this year and giving them first option on the gardens for next year. That's a pretty normal practice. I will say that all of our other programs that we had, recreation programs where we received fees, have been refunded, especially for those that we had either closed facilities or canceled the programs. So the intent of that was not anything other than giving them that information that we'd be doing that, and that we're hopeful that we're able to open the gardens in the spring sometime. So we're watering the plots. We've refunded. The other concern that was initially brought up, and we've communicated to all the gardeners, is some of the gardeners indicated that they really relied on their gardens as a source of organic produce. And we actually had some gardeners that reached out to us and said, especially in this time, we had a couple that mentioned that both of the wage earners in the family had lost their jobs, or the primary wage earner had, and they were really counting on having a garden. So we did reach out to our CSA partner And we were able to check what the capacity was there, and we were actually able to secure some CSA shares that we're sharing with some of our community gardeners that are anticipating losing even through the spring here their opportunity to create and grow produce for themselves. So that was our initial approach. Getting into the limited access plan that we've developed, and again, this is for discussion. Um, Generally, we would like to keep the gardens closed to the public. In other words, no visitors allowed. If you're going there to garden, you can go there to garden. We're looking at 4 days out of the week right now because of our staffing availability. It would be a Monday through Thursday availability for gardeners to access, 7 a.m. till 4:30 p.m. Um, what we would do for gardener access is on odd days, odd numbered plots would have access. On even days, even numbered plots. To give you an idea, we have 162 numbered plots that are outside of our children's garden and our shared gardens. And then we would put together 2-hour work time slots, 7 to 9, 9:30 to 11:30, 12 to 2 p.m., and 2:30 to 4 p.m. So there'd be 4 opportunities for people to sign up to access the gardens every other day. And then what we would do is we would limit the total number of people coming in to 24 people in each of those times. So you'd have a total of 96 people that could come into the garden on any given day. We would control that by actually pre-mailing out plot numbers that are color coded for the vehicles. So as they come in, they would have to have that in their windshield to come in and work the garden. That access in those other 3 days of the week that we wouldn't be open for the garden, public access to the parking at Lusher would still remain closed, and we'd have it barricaded right at the farmhouse. We do have portable restrooms that are still at the site that the gardeners use. We would actually have our staff member that controls access would actually also be there on a continuous basis, reminding people and encouraging people about social distancing. Tools and gloves, we'd require that gardeners bring their own tools and gloves, so our tool sheds would be locked. And at this time, we would not have any wheelbarrows that the gardeners could use. Another precaution that we put in is eating and drinking in the gardens. We don't want people to bring food in and drink in while they're there. And then we would ask that gardeners, as they harvest their produce, that they don't wash it on site, but they actually bag it and take it home to wash it. And a number of our gardeners already do that, but we'd reinforce that. We would limit the number of gardeners per lot. It would be one person, or if it's a couple that does it, we would allow the couple to come in and garden together if they're from the same household. We all share spigots and hoses there. We would ask that the gardeners use gloves when accessing those spigots and hoses. And that's the common area that we're a little bit worried about, but we know that water access is important. The report we get back from our garden coordinator and from our parks folks that work with the gardeners to provide water to them is that the majority of gardeners in our gardens actually set up a timer for their irrigation for their plots. So they actually buy a box and they put it in and they actually have a timer. We're going to encourage cloth face masks, not required, but encourage those to be worn. Obviously, stay home if you feel sick. And then each of the gardeners will be given a safety practices reminder in writing that talks about washing the hands thoroughly before they come to the garden, after they return home, avoid touching nose, ears, eyes. And then if you are to sneeze, cough, all of those things that we're hearing about COVID. the initial recommendation or possibility for this would be we could institute this as soon as tomorrow, although notification of the farmers would be difficult for us to get out in the next few hours, but we could start working on that. And then our our idea would be that we run this program through the 1st of May, which is a Friday. So it would basically be about, I imagine that we get 2 days this weekend and probably 2 full weeks of garden access. So that's the basics of the program. I will note this is not anything other than I do need to note that this is probably the second safest way to approach the gardens. The first would be to keep them remain closed to the gardeners. And we have had, and I would be very remiss if I didn't mention that the department is very aware of the passion of the community gardeners. We're aware of the passion of all the people that right now are being locked out of facilities that they normally use, that they're being held back from doing the things that they're really passionate about. That doesn't fall short for us in Parks and Recreation. That is the field that we're in. We basically connect people to their passions, and that's what we're all about. So I don't want for it to be portrayed that any of the actions that the department has taken during these extraordinarily weird times is anything against any one group or any groups. We're here to serve and connect people with the things they're passionate about. And I just want to reinforce that everybody on our team is bought into that, and that's why we do what we do.
I have a couple of questions for you.
Yes, Ken.
First of all, is it's every other day for 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday? Is that correct?
Yes, and right now, the idea on that, quite honestly, Kent, has to do with what resources we have available to staff it.
Right.
We may be able to make some modifications to those dates, but that's really where we know that we have staffing to monitor it.
Well, I'm just thinking as I thought about that, I say, let's say an odd day is on Friday, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Then you go, the next odd day would be Sunday, and you're not going to be in there for Sunday. So after that, the next odd day is Tuesday, which gives you about 4 or 5 days without any, if a person is on the odd number, he has about 4 days when there's no contact with the gardens. Is that how you see it as working as well?
Yes, and actually, I'm just sorry, I'm looking sideways here, but I'm looking.
That's all right.
Yeah, so it would be 1 week they might have, like this upcoming week, they would be in on the 15th, and then they would be back with access available on the 21st and 23rd the next week, and then the 29th the following week. Is the way that it looks right now.
So they get 2 days a week is what you're telling me.
About approximately 2 days a week, yeah.
Okay, next question. We're going to try this out. This is a temporary thing. We're hoping it works. And there may be modifications, but one of my understanding of the reason it was closed in the first place, because people were gathering and congregating in the parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you anticipate that this will prevent that?
Well, I think that by limiting the number that we're allowing in for any one shift, which is 24 plots, I think that we can monitor that and keep people spread out. And the idea is that the way that the plots are set up is that it's kind of a checkerboard pattern. So I think that with that in mind, that we'll be able to regulate it, especially with a limit. I wouldn't want to go higher than that, because even with 24 and with a limited amount of time, we're anticipating that at those times we're going to see a number of people that are coming into their plots. And some timeframes will be busier than others.
So the one thing I guess I would ask is, if you're going to do this on a temporary basis, what kinds of things would motivate you then to close them down again?
Well, I think if we observe that people are not abiding by the access plan, in other words, if people are trying to come down on days that they're not there, that they're not supposed to be in their plots, and that if it for some reason becomes untenable for us to actually control the access at the times that we're open. Right now, we think that we have a pretty good plan in place from a staffing standpoint, where we'll actually have somebody waving vehicles through at the farmhouse, and then another person stationed out in the gardens. So I think that we can do it, but if we went backwards, it would be probably if we saw that we couldn't control that situation, or if we saw people coming into the gardens from another location on times when they weren't scheduled to come in.
Okay. Now, I've asked several
Ivan,
questions.
before you go, even then, Ivan, would we try to go? I think we want to avoid whipsawing between open and closed and open and closed. I think we would first attempt, if we saw someone not complying, we would probably work directly with that person. We might exclude
Absolutely.
that person as opposed to trying to exclude everybody because of the actions of one or two people.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, on an individual basis, we would address issues that came up, and we know that these time slots and these hours may not. There might be special circumstances for one or two that they may not work out for. We're more than willing to work with one and two that are outside the norm, but we'd like to keep it as normalized as possible so that we can stay consistent with our messaging.
Okay, Councilor Mans and then Councilor Lamont. You can unmute yourself, unmute. Councilor Mans?
I was trying to be a good citizen, and then there you have it. First of all, I would like to thank Ivan and his team, as well as our city manager and her team, as they have and I hate to use the word brunt, but they have had a number of emails, many of which were less than complimentary. So thank you for all the work that you've done. I appreciate that. Being the conservative person that I am around COVID-19, I probably would have elected to keep the gardens closed. And I'm speaking this only because, like I say, I'm extremely conservative in that regard. My question is around face masks. Is there any reason why we would not have people wearing face masks? I mean, you're out there, you're working in the dirt, something goes up your nose, you sneeze. We must wear face masks everywhere else that we go, for the most part. I know it's not, is it mandatory in Oregon yet? No, California. Any thoughts around that? I know that's a small detail, but it's something that's been on my mind.
The general thought comes from some conversations that we had with Scott Wachter with Fire, and that he's had with Dr. Sani about face masks, and what the general purpose of them is to keep you from breathing on other people. So, but the other thing, especially in our society, is that the face mask promotes you to touch the places you shouldn't be touching, because it's something different on your face. Those of us that wear glasses know about it. I can't go without touching it. So although we would encourage them, I think that it adds another layer of us enforcing the face mask. And if you've noticed, if you've been out and about, you'll notice people wearing face masks and they adjust them, routinely, so they're below the nose and only covering the mouth and back and forth. So I think with a strong recommendation that people wear them, I think that that's the most appropriate way in light of not having that restriction or having that requirement right now. And it goes in line with what we've heard when we've talked to our healthcare folks and our public safety folks.
Great, thank you. And again, please thank the entire Parks and Rec team.
I will.
Thank you.
Two things. One is, if I've got this right, I mean, we don't really do that much staffing for the community gardens when we're in normal times. Is that correct? There's not somebody watching and regulating and flagging cars and all that. Is it pretty much they can come 7 days a week? Is that right?
That's true. We do have somebody that is our community coordinator, that her primary function and her role is 36 hours a week is coordinating those community gardens. But no, as far as her flagging, she's more of a resource, and then she's also the person that enforces our current rules, like you need to weed, you need to not spray, those types of things, but not,
So,
she doesn't normally flag people in or out.
so this new approach, which is very detailed, and I want to thank staff for it, is then we're going to have staff there, which would be different than normal times because we want to keep enforcing the social distancing rule and also to regulate the cars coming and going so we're not having a big load. So I think the public needs to understand that this is a staffing situation that's different. And I want to echo what Jackie said. I think it's important that the citizens know how hard you all are working, management staff, park staff, everybody. And I didn't appreciate the tone of some of the emails we get, and we listened to everything, and we were getting great input, including some of the ideas that you put forward. Very constructive input, but some people were taking on our manager and our parks director, and I thought that was wrong. We work as a team. Everybody on the screen is a team, and we have one voice, one plan, and that's where it's coming from. It's not just coming from staff or us or whatever. It's coming from a team. So I appreciate the work you're doing. I think we're at this crossroads to get it open. Go. I love the mayor's idea. Let's get the motion going.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor Kohlhoff.
So I echo my appreciation for your explanation specifically about the letter that went out that was so misunderstood. And the intention was very constructive, and in the future, to the best of our ability, maybe we can be a little more clarifying and get that message out, because it clearly said closing it. And so people were upset. They thought they were getting mixed messages. So I really appreciated you taking a step back and explaining the intention. I wasn't surprised by your limited access plan, because when I read all of the letters, that is exactly what people said they were committed to doing, and to the nth. And I appreciated the mayor saying, and what happens if you don't? Like, you know, what we have to say to people, it's in your hands, because I'm not as flippant as maybe people feel that I would be about the virus. I am well aware that we're in a position to keep it under wraps. I personally think it's going to probably go on for some time, or aspects of it. And so as we deal with this, we learn new behaviors. I appreciated your laying out that plan, and my bet is that people, a word to the wise is sufficient, as we were taught as youngsters. And I think that it's going to be good. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, if you want a motion, let us know. We'll go.
Well,
I actually would recommend that you don't give us a motion right
Okay.
now, because we might need adjustments, but I do want to hear any feedback if you have concerns about the way we're approaching the situation.
Councilor O'Neill.
Ivan, I think it's being a longtime gardener up there, and right now the temperatures in the morning are pretty cool. It doesn't, really warm up until 10 or 11 o'clock. I think you're going to have a fairly short window where a lot of our gardeners are going to want to work. Whereas in the summer, it's busy at 9, but this time of the year, I bet you it's going to be more like 11 to 3. I've gone to that garden for however many years it's been open, probably around 4 o'clock. It's pretty quiet there. So if there's a lot of gardeners that are listening, later in the day, it's warmer. And I think we should explain to our gardeners is if we do have a limited amount of people, get in, get your work, and get out. So I think that would be helpful.
Counselor Wendland.
Yeah, I would echo. Yes, I would echo Councilor O'Neill's comments. I think this virus thing is we're under sort of emergency procurement or emergency standards, and I support opening up the garden under Director Andrew Holmes' long list. I think it's pretty detailed. I would have just said, open it up, go even on odd days, and monitor yourself. But you probably have dealt with more humankind people than I have in managing it, so I'll leave that to you. But I do want to say that I think people are under a different mindset than they were several weeks ago, and they know that there's some rules attached. They know that this is going to be a different kind of gardening experience until things are lifted. And if we need to, obviously, if it gets out of hand, we would have to take further action. But I have faith in our people and our gardeners, and I think they'll do just a fine job of following the rules and getting things done. And we just have to tell them that they have to help share some of their harvest success. No, I'm just kidding. Later in the season. So anyway, I'm all for it. And thank you to the staff for putting up some good rules. And I would hope that they'll be followed with great passion and that we won't have to talk about this again. So that's my vote.
Mr. Annerholm, I think you've got an idea that we're endorsing your program, so thank you very much to you and your staff.
Okay, you're welcome. And I will be sending out an email to you, the mayor and council, that have the highlights of this program, and then a little plot map too, so that you can see what I was talking about.
Great.
Ivan, before you go, is there anything you want to tell the counselors about what we're observing in the parks? I know we had a nice, hot, warm, sunny weekend, and I know that it's sometimes tempting for folks to be out there.
Yeah. So what we're observing in the parks on Thursday of this last week, we instituted a special shift where we've asked some of our employees to come in and basically be people that are educating about physical distancing in our parks. So we targeted the Lusher Azalea area, George Rogers, Foothills, Millennium Plaza, and Westlake Parks. So starting on Thursday and then through the weekend, and then we're extending it through this upcoming weekend. We have people that essentially are walking around the parks, and if they see people that aren't practicing social distancing, they're going to educate them, remind them what they need to do. They're also enforcing some of the closures where we've had some issues. The positive thing I have to report back after this last weekend is that in probably 98% of the cases, people in Lake Oswego are following social distancing while they're out in our parks. I can say that in 100% of the occasions where we needed to have some education with them, the people were compliant. Over the weekend, we did have one incident on Thursday that resulted in the barricading and closure of the amphitheater and the viewing dolphin at Roar Park. That we actually had to call LOCOM and have enforcement to get people to comply with breaking up a large group of people that had congregated there. It's an area where we have continual issues anyway, especially when the weather's nice. It's a nice place for some of the youngsters from like Oswego to hang out, and it's kind of their own space, and it has been for years. But other than that, people are very compliant, and we're getting a really good response from the community. So, when we talk about reopening the community gardens in a limited access plan, I'm more comfortable today than I was before the weekend, based on what we saw in the community. And yeah, so it's that's one of the things we're doing. And then obviously we have a whole list of things, and I'll be sending out something a little bit later this week to City Council, just kind of to let you know what we're doing in Parks and Recreation, because we are still moving forward with a lot of capital projects. We still are planning if we can have programs this summer. So we do have a number of things that are still working, and we have the majority of our staff is still working, with the exception of our part-time staff that we bring in on a seasonal basis. So
Thank you. Okay,
you're welcome.
City Manager Bennett, what else?
So I think some of you have been asking about money. And so I brought my money guy here to give you an overview of what's going on with city revenues, at least. And I don't think we have a great rundown on the expenditure side, because that usually trails, right? Am I right, Sean? Well, you'll tell me in a second. So Sean's here to talk to you about sort of what the revenue picture looks like right now. And then I've asked him to keep an eye on the expenditure side too, so that later we can give you a better assessment of the total picture. Sean.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to share our first 9 months of the fiscal year with you. So I just want to kind of start with the city's revenues are very stable. As we know, in good times and bad times for the economy, the revenues here are pretty just okay. They're moderate. They don't go up when the economy goes up, and they don't go down. Probably the one that hits the biggest is our property tax line. And at the height of the recession, we had a collection rate of about 93.3%. And last year we had a collection rate of 95.9%. So yes, it's good and bad, but it's not too drastic, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So we usually have, I guess what I'd like to kind of start with is with the property taxes is, as you can kind of see, for the year we budgeted about 35.4 million. So far we've collected 34.8 million. We usually get about 92% of our property taxes in November, December, and we get another 4% of what we're going to collect for the year in March, and then the last 4% in June. So as you can kind of see, we're looking pretty good right now in property taxes. We're actually probably will be coming in a little bit higher than budgeted, but we do budget pretty conservatively, so we do have that carried over, so we can use it for the next budget cycle for you to budget your one-time item. Franchise fees too, you can kind of see they're coming in right on schedule. Our biggest one is PGE, and it came in last month. It was right about where we projected it to be. So we're looking pretty good in our franchise fees for the fiscal year. As far as intergovernmental, these are our state shared revenues with like the cigarette and liquor taxes here. They trail a bit. We don't get our first payment for the year until September, and they come in monthly. So even those are looking pretty favorable. Licensing fees, this is where I do have a little concern. We budgeted about 1.1 million. The majority of it here is in TLT, so your hotel motel tax, and we've collected about 750, 760,000. So we're looking good. We're at 72,000. It's not like we're not going to get anything for the year, but we are looking at, if no one's staying in a hotel between now and the end of the year, being down about 300,000. But remember, we're looking really good up here at property taxes. That should more than offset what we don't get for TLT this fiscal year. If you look down here at our investment income, again, pretty conservative. We didn't really project that big spike there for a few months where our our investments were going to be getting almost 3%. We do more of around 2%. So we're doing pretty well there too. We've already collected 100% of our investment income for the year. And then, so I did the general fund and I also did the street fund. And I did the street fund mainly because that's another one of our state shared revenues. And that's where we have the street motor vehicle fees. So this is where we, because of the House Bill 2017, that we were going to get an extra $800,000 to $900,000 per year. We just sold bonds on those, and now we have to pay debt service. So, you know, I'm a little nervous there, but not too bad, because as kind of a thing that we weren't 100% sure of the county vehicle registration fee that was going to come in, we actually budgeted zero, and then we were going to use it as a carryover in the next budget cycle. If it did come in, used toward capital projects on the street fund. So it's new. It just started in January. So as of through the end of February, we had received $6,000. So we might get $100,000 or $200,000 for the county vehicle registration fee this year. But like I said, that should help offset anything in the motor vehicle fee. Then the last thing to kind of point out how we're doing this fiscal year is, you know, we did have a very favorable bond issue in the street fund. So we might come in a little low up here, but at the same time, we did get an extra $2 million to do capital projects. So right now, this is what they're using to do the capital projects like this summer. What Murray Smith is planning to do. This is the funding source for it. It isn't this funds up here. This is actually further out, years 2 through 6. So, but then another thing I wanted to point out is, how does this affect us, or how does this look next year? So if my crystal ball worked, we'll see. But really, the biggest one is our property taxes. Our AV was pretty favorable this year. It was a little bit greater than the 4% increase that we budgeted. So if I sort of put that into our model and then redid what we're projecting for next year, and even if we get a 93.3% collection rate, which is the worst we did during the recession, we come in about $100,000 short of what we budgeted for our property taxes. So that's a pretty conservative. The one that is still kind of iffy, though, that I would say, you know, I want to bring up is the TLT. We get, in the first 5 months, we get about, of the year, so July, August, September, October, November, the first 5 months, we get about half of our TLT tax. So that will be one that we will definitely want to watch next year, and just hopefully we get a little bit more carryover that we would have gotten property taxes to help offset any kind of loss or non-recognition that we're getting from the TLT. Investments, again, are about $300,000 we budgeted for next year, so those should also be fine. So other than that, if you have any questions.
I have one shot. My question is, we're seeing the revenue, and it looks okay. What about the expenses? Are they down or up or about what you projected?
Well, as of so far, we only have the month of March to really track. I'm tracking about $2,500 in expenditures from invoices. I haven't got the city's credit cards inputted yet. And we have about $15,000 of overtime for the month of March. So it's not that things are costing more. More, I think, staff such as like Martha, Megan, people at the library, they're not working a lot of overtime, or they wouldn't count it, but they're being redirected to really focus on this. So it's regular wages that were already in there. But so if you're just looking at the overtime, it's, like I said, we're about $15,000 for the month of March.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Councilor Nguyen.
Thank you, Director Cross. Thanks for providing that update. So it sounds like, you know, what I'm hearing is we're in good shape financially. So are there, I mean, currently looking at, you know, of course, we're saying it's that we finished 9 months of the current fiscal year, but going into this last quarter, I think the last quarter is we're probably going to see, if there's going to be any impact, we're going to see it most vividly in this last quarter. But looking forward to next year, do you foresee any issues with current projects we've got underway? We were talking about the pool, for example. We're talking about, well, currently City Hall is already under construction, but any other projects that we, you know, are, you know, we have any questions about? I mean, you know, we kind of made a commitment with the school district, for example? Do you see that being in jeopardy at all?
Well, with the parks, we sold $24 million worth of bonds for any kind of capital projects that the parks is doing. So no, their capital projects, no. City Hall, not as much. It's really not a COVID thing with the City Hall project. It's just that we had about $1.5 million. We thought the North Anchor, when we sold the properties back, would come back toward the project. So, there's that little bit, but that really has nothing to do with this per se. And it's actually 2 years out when the final payments for City Hall, the last $5 million is supposed to be done in fiscal year.
So the bid environment for capital projects has been very favorable to the city in the last 3 months. And I would expect if it's anything like the last recession, we will get very competitive proposals on our capital projects. And so actually it's a pretty cost-effective time to spend public money on capital projects. Those bids that you awarded just last week, we saved $1 million for the street projects and about $1.5 million between the two park projects. So it's actually a pretty good time for us to advance capital projects as long as we don't spend anything that we can't afford to operate on the other side. I don't worry as much about the construction as I do about the ability to actually stand up and operate a recreation center and swimming pool complex. It all depends on your crystal ball and how long this recession is going on.
Okay. And then the other question I had was in regards to PERS, for example. Now that the investments in the PERS program, the stock market's doing much differently than it was before, and that's going to impact the return on PERS. I mean, do you foresee any impact in additional costs as a result of COVID on what the city pays for PERS, for example?
Not compared to where we were a year ago when we were doing the budget. Yes, it could out a few years, but with House Bill 1049, that actually put more curbs on it, so it will not raise as much. So right now we have an estimate of the increase and not being a 5 percentage point increase into the next biennium. It's more of a 4 percentage increase into the next biennium with the new curbs. But how this affects us, we'll have to wait a few months until the next estimate comes out to tell us how far we are. I mean, I don't think the last one had a 31% increase in the market either. So I'll know more in 6 to 8 months.
Other questions? Thank you, Mr. Cross.
Okay, so the only other thing I wanted to cover is just to let you know that we are, and all credit goes to Anne Marie and Wes in this situation, trying to figure out how we can conduct meetings of boards and commissions where we can let folks watch and occasionally offer comments, but still allow the chairs of those committees to maintain control over the meetings and also to provide general public access. It hasn't been easy, and I talked to the mayor about this. It reminds me of when my children were infants, and how I thought very naively when I had the first child that I would still be able to get up and go to work only an hour before work time, and how I learned quickly that it took more like 2 hours to get the child packaged and ready to go to daycare rather than 1. And so things that we think should take 5 to 10 minutes end up taking half an hour just because we're working remotely and we're working with different technologies and different people's abilities to manage technology. So with that said, probably the first board and commission we would bring back up would be the DRC, because we actually have some active land use applications that need to go to the DRC. The planning commission's also on our mind. Historic Resources has some stuff that's been delayed, and the Parks Board. Those are probably the top ones we bring back first. But there's more to it than I think any of us really thought when we thought about trying to have that many folks meeting remotely, including the fact that the staff are meeting remotely, and so the amount of time it takes to prepare a packet is actually quite a bit longer than it used to be. So I will keep you posted on that, but I didn't want you to think that we were just neglecting or ignoring those issues. We're just trying to do it in a way where the meeting actually works for not just the folks on the commission, but also for the general public. Does anybody have any questions about that? Yeah.
Councilor Lamont?
So Martha, can you just run us through, or Anne Marie, as far as the 3 venues, as far as getting comment in? So if somebody calls during our meeting Is Anne Marie the one that gets that? And then the second is if they come into the meeting or they email us. How does that all work logistically?
Anne Marie, why don't you talk about what we're setting up for next Tuesday's meeting for citizen comments?
Sure. That's a great question. I'm glad that you brought it up because I know it's important to council to hear from the public. As you'll recall, we normally make some time on the schedule, on the agenda for citizen comment during your regular meetings. So those are 2 Tuesdays a month. What we're going to try for April 21st is to encourage people to contact the city reporter up to an hour before the meeting to receive an invitation to the meeting so that they could provide live comment in person. So we'll give that a try. We're also encouraging people to remember that they can email council distribution at any time. But that's what we're planning to try on April 21st. And then after that, there's a team of folks here that is interested in seeing, what beyond COVID. So once we get back behind the dais and we're meeting again in person, we really do think that there's an appetite for members of the community to be able to participate in our meetings, even though they can't make it. They've got the baby down, finally to bed, or whatever circumstances, they still want to participate. So there's some energy right now behind thinking of ways that we can encourage some different types of engagement in the future.
My only add-on would be just on the email response was very effective in the meetings I've done with email. And we just need to have one person collecting and then bringing them back out to the council. And I don't know if that's you also, but it's a lot easier. They can read right through them as they're going along, and it's very effective because we'll all get them, but who's the point person? That's the key. But we'd have to worry about it today, but as we get closer.
Okay, thank you for that comment.
Anybody else? Councilor Mans.
I have a general question that several people have brought up to me probably looking forward to happy summer things. One of which is our 4th of July parade, if that will or will not continue. Again, I always tell people to please call the city or email the CSI, and nobody has a crystal ball. The other are the summer concerts, which I understand, at least toward the end of the summer, may still be continuing. And I guess this would be directed toward Director Anderholm, if he has any magical ability to look into the future.
I don't have any magical ability. But on our community events, we have been discussing with our event crew, and I think the other one that's important is the farmers market is another big event that we have.
It's a big one, yes.
So what we're doing is with the farmers market, we've come up with an alternative plan of how the market would operate. We're still fleshing that out. We've been doing a lot of research on how other farmers market work. We looked at drive-through options, and with our location, it's problematic from traffic. So we're looking at a limited number of people that can get into it and a limited number of vendors. So it'd be like going to a grocery store and a farmer's market, following the arrows for the direction, lots of space in between the vendors, everything prepackaged, and then walking out with no live entertainment. We've begun to take a look at our other events. 4th of July, one of the things that we've done is we've reached out to those vendors that we are contractually obligated to, and we've made some provision should we cancel. But our plan is to wait until the moment that we need to cancel before we do. So we're not planning on coming out with an announcement, next week that says 4th of July is canceled. And primarily what that is it's easier for us to make some provisions up front with our contractors that help us put those on about how to, either move the money forward, get a refund, or how that works, than it is for us to have to plan them at a last minute. So it's easier for us to do that. So we're still planning on that. We are looking at modifications. We are obviously doing a lot of research on how other communities are planning on doing events like that. But we're still moving forward with the hope that we'll see some sort of downturn or great downturn in what's going on right now with the virus that will allow us to have some of those. And again, our concert series don't start until July, so they're in July, August, with the exception of the Millennium concerts. And those still don't start until the last weekend in June. So we are tracking that, and we are definitely developing a plan, an alternative plan for the farmers market, so that people will have some sense of normalcy and some sense of getting out into the community. If in fact we can do it in a way that's safe for our community and for our vendors.
Well, and again, thank you to you and the team and all of the behind the scenes work that's going on around all of this. Can't thank you enough.
You're welcome.
Councilor Kohlhoff. Councilor Kohlhoff?
Right. So that sounds good. And I really do appreciate having it laid out that if these boards and commissions can be rolled out in a prompt way, we'll also get some experience with technology things. So that, for example, I was struggling with connectivity, and because my Mac doesn't really like Cisco, it just doesn't. But as we go along, I suspect we'll iron some of this out, and I welcome the boards and commissions and their input. So if that, can work technologically while we get ready for in-person, that would be super good. And I add my own feedback regarding the DEI task force, which has not been able to meet, as have none of the other advisory committees, not because we've suddenly stopped being interested or care, but because we were dealing with some core issues that I do see starting to really get ironed out. And like Councilor Lamont said, we may just really, we're kind of enjoying not having to drive here or there and do some of this by technology. But thank you. That's good.
Any other further comments?
So just as a reminder, your next meeting is next Tuesday, April 21st at 3 p.m.
3 p.m., okay.
I'll send Councillor Wendland 2 or 3 messages to remind him. I'm teasing.
And me too.
If there's nothing else, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Good job.
Thank you. Thank you. Wait, who's going to go off first? I feel like, okay, there we go.